Welcome to Herbally Yours, an adventure into the world of natural medicine. Here is your host, Dr. Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse who will help you take the leap to ultimate wellness.
Greetings, and thank you so much for joining me, Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse, for another edition of Herbally Yours, right here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. Herbally Yours brings you the latest information about the many facets in the world of natural living. Today, I am so happy to have on board as my guest Louise Gittleman, who is a PhD and a nutritionist. And Louise has fearlessly stood on the front lines of diet and detox, the environment, and women's health for more than 40 years. She's described by Self Magazine as one of the top 10 notable nutritionists in the United States. And she has thousands of individual clients, health coaches, and practitioners who have benefited from her work. As the First Lady of Nutrition and a multiple award-winning author of over 35 books, she continues to break new ground in functional medicine and is ready to share how she built up from the ground and stayed relevant in the industry for more than 4 decades. You can find Louise at facebook.com, Louise Gittleman. And also we're going to talk about her new book, Radical Metabolism. And there's also a website for that, radicalmetabolism.com. So thank you so much for joining us today, Louise.
My pleasure to be with my friend, the natural nurse, and how are you this fine day?
We're fine, and I want to thank you so much for being our guest. Now, Louise, 35 books is an awful lot of writing. How do you have time to do all that with your busy schedule?
That's a good question, my good friend, and I think it's almost like a mission that I've had for the past 40 years. There are topics, there are concerns, there are trends that I feel I need to weigh in on, and I've been very blessed to have studied with some wonderful masters in healing and health over the decades. So I just feel it's my duty, it's kind of like my moral obligation to share the methods that they have used and to look for underlying causes of some of the most urgent health concerns of 2019.
Now, when we say your books are groundbreaking, I know that you have titles that have been on the New York Times bestseller list.
Yes, I've been blessed in that regard. With 35 books, I became an overnight sensation with number 18, which was the Fat Flush Plan, and that kind of revolutionized the concerns about diet and detox. I wrote 4 to 5 books in that genre. And then the other book that I was very humbled to have seen on the New York Times bestseller list is one on perimenopause, Ellen, called Before the Change. So 2 of the books made it to the New York Times bestseller list, and in those days you really had to sell quite a few books to make the list. So I've been blessed. I've had the opportunity to appear on major television. I've had columns in major magazines, and it's all about spreading the word of health and healing, which I think we need more than ever before.
So is that how you got your name, the First Lady of Nutrition?
Well, that came to me, and it was bestowed upon me by my good friend, the late Dr. Atkins, who said to me at one point when I was on WOR, he said, "You are really the First Lady of Nutrition." I said, "I'll take it." And so I was very grateful, very humbled for his coronation, so to speak. And so we've been using that for quite some time. And, when you've been there and done that and seen all the diet trends come and go for the past 40 years, you're in a position of authority and experience. And so I'm trying to use that position responsibly.
Yes, I remember Dr. Atkins well.
May he rest in peace.
It's interesting because what is now called the keto diet, and I'd like your input on that, really looks awful lot like the old Atkins diet.
Well, it's being practiced like the old Atkins diet, but keto is theoretically 70% fat, and that was not the motivation of the Atkins diet, which was much more high protein. But I would say that keto is going in a better direction, but it's got the wrong kinds of fats. We need a little bit more carbohydrate, number 2, more fiber, number 3, and the ability to digest all that fat, number 4, with so many people without a gallbladder and congested bile. And that was really the motivation for writing my latest book, which is Radical Metabolism, a powerful new plan to blast fat and reignite your energy in just 21 days.
Wow, just 21 days that you can actually change how you feel is a pretty intense promise.
It's very intense, but we start with an intensive. We do a 4-day intensive cleanse to kind of get the body primed and pumped, to get your kidneys toned, your liver detoxed, your lungs cleared out, and your lymph flowing. So I don't overpromise and underdeliver. I try to make my promises doable and actionable. And because I've been working in the field for so many years, I've got the experience of knowing what works, what doesn't, and what's practical for men and women living in our day and time. I mean, it's a very different day and time than it was 20 years ago. There's much more environmental toxicity. The stresses are greater. And then you've got the electromagnetic radiation that surrounds us 24/7, as well as the glyphosates and the nano-aluminum. So we have more stressors now more than ever. So you have to make your body an invincible fortress, which is what my aim is with Radical Metabolism.
Wow. That was a lot there. That was a lot there that you threw out, and very, very intense. And I want to remind our listeners that you are listening to Herbally Yours on the voice of Nassau Community College 90.3 WHPC. I'm Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse, and my guest today is Anne Louise Gittleman, and she has 35 books, but we're focusing on her latest, which is called Radical Metabolism. And what you just shared, Anne Louise, is quite radical, and I'm not sure everyone knows all the things that you discussed. Like, for instance, what is nano-aluminum?
It's the kind of aluminum that's very prevalent in the air these days. It's a nano-sized, which is a very micro-sized particle of aluminum that can get into your system, affecting your lungs, affecting your entire immunity. And so we're finding that there is a bunch of new toxins that are very different than what we were exposed to 20 to 30 years ago when I was first coming up in the ranks. So this necessitates different types of treatments, many of which I discuss in Radical Metabolism. So, you know, the world is becoming increasingly toxic. As we get older, we become toxic waste dumps, and you have to detox on a daily basis, and that's something that you and I both agree with, I think.
Yeah. Now, is there a way to avoid being inundated with some of these environmental stressors? Of course, our food, which we will talk about, that we have control about. But when you're talking about something like electromagnetic radiation, particularly the 5G, which they are about to unleash. Right.
Is there a way? We're all exposed, so that's the reason, and I'll repeat this, is that we have to make our bodies even stronger, because these assaults, Ellen, are not going to go away. They'll become more intense as the years go on. So you have to make your system stronger to withstand all of the assaults that are being thrown our way. Now, when it comes to the 5G and all the EMFs that surround us currently, you have to reduce exposure as much as you can. Get yourself some shungite, which can protect you from some of the detrimental effects of radiation, and have very antioxidant-rich foods, as well as a little bit of oil of rosemary, very, very good for getting rid of EMFs. So there's a lot of little tips and tricks that I talk about in the book, but I think that what's most important is that you make yourself into this invisible fortress, because the toxins and the toxic overload, they're not going away.
Now, you did throw out some very good pointers. So how would someone protect themselves, let's say, from electromagnetic fields using something like aromatherapy with something like rosemary oil? How would that help?
Well, the documentation and the clinical studies suggest that it's very protective against radiation, the ionizing and to some degree the non-ionizing radiation that you're getting from your cell phones and the cell phone towers. And so you could inhale it, you can use it in your personal care, putting a few drops in a moisturizer in your hair, shampoo, for example, or you can just put a few drops in water and take it throughout the day. So rosemary oil is a terrific one and very good for your memory, may I also say. So that's just an easy tip. There are lots of little easy, I call them healthy hacks that you can do to make your body into this invisible fortress, but you just have to know what you're up against and then use the right weapons to protect yourself.
And I think that people sometimes feel very relieved because if some of these symptoms that they may get, which you can list for us, and their physician will tell them, well, there's nothing wrong with your blood work, and so you must need an antidepressant.
No, because when you're exposed to these EMFs, for example, that we're all exposed to 24/7, you can't go into a movie theater or into a, let's say, a coffee shop or even an airplane without being exposed, are very detrimental to your adrenal glands, your fight-or-flight system. So you are constantly secreting stress-active, they call them heat shock proteins, to be exact. So you're constantly promoting all of these heat shock proteins that impact your cortisol with ups and downs, impacting your ability to withstand stress. So you have to reduce your exposure as much as possible. You have to ground yourself 20 minutes on a daily basis.
How do you do that? Wait, let's not just slide past that. I'm sure you talk about it in Radical Metabolism, but how does one ground themselves?
One goes out into the earth and stands in your garden for 20 minutes, and you discharge all of those negative, the kind of static electricity that can build up, and you infuse your body with the electrons, which are neutralizing to the free radicals. So there's really good science about the impact of grounding, which I think is second to penicillin in terms of its importance in the human body.
So that's really interesting. Now we call standing on the earth in your bare feet, we have a special name for it called grounding.
We do, or you can ground yourself at night with a grounding wristband and plug yourself into the wall, for example, the electrical ground. There are many different ways of grounding, which of course I talk about, here we go, in Radical Metabolism in much greater detail.
Well, that's really interesting because I find that when people come across something like your book and Radical Metabolism and try some of these things, that they're amazed that it works. First they feel relief, and then they have a lot of anger about why didn't their doctor tell them this?
Well, yes, but this is a do-it-yourself time, Ellen. So the doctor can't keep up with everything, and it's your job to protect your body. It's your, it doesn't come with a do-it-yourself manual. So you've got to listen to wonderful teachers and way showers like The Natural Nurse. You should follow my blog at AnnLouise.com, and then you'll get the inside information from those of us that have been there, done that, and have had 40 years of experience in seeing all these trends come and go. But this is one of the most easy ones that you can do without spending a penny.
Right. And what if somebody lives in an apartment?
If somebody lives in an apartment, you can do the electrical ground with a grounding wristband that I write about in Radical Metabolism, and you have to surround yourself with some good shungite from Russia, which has been shown to protect against EMFs. So there's lots of little tips and tricks, and then, of course, is the oil of rosemary. Lots of tips and tricks you can do. And just don't use your cell phone 24/7. Put it on airplane mode, and if you can, disable your router before you go to bed. How's that for a tip?
Yeah, it's hard, right? Because people really are having those things on. They're even falling asleep with them next to them, and then they wonder why they can't sleep, and they have headaches. It's really true. What a wonderful tip. Now, we're going to have to go on a little break right here, and I want to remind you, listeners, that you're listening to Herbally Yours on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. Listen live online at nccradio.org or on iHeartRadio. We love being on iHeart. For more information on today's guest or topic Email us at whpc@ncc.edu. Stay tuned. Herbally Yours. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Janelle Hale, founder and CEO of the National Breast Cancer Foundation. Early detection saved my life. It could save yours too. I was only 34 years old and the mother of 3 when I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I was forced to make a decision about my health with few options. After my treatment, I made a commitment to provide help and inspire hope to those affected by breast cancer through early detection, education, and support services. I was fortunate to have resources and support through my journey, but so many facing breast cancer have to overcome the burdens of cost and fear alone. No one should face breast cancer alone. Today, NBCF has provided over 1 million early detection and patient navigation services so that women in need have access to these potentially life-saving resources. To learn what every woman needs to know about breast cancer, visit nbcf.org.
Yes, how are you? And welcome back. I'm glad you're with us and you are tuning in to Herbally Yours on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. Our guest today is Ann Louise Gittleman, well known as the First Lady of Nutrition, author of 35 books, a PhD nutritionist who lectures all over the country and has a wonderful blog, which you can find at AnnLouiseGittleman.com. You can find her at Facebook, of course. And we're talking about many topics, but just with a focus on her latest book called Radical Metabolism. And what is different about this book than many of your others, Ann Louise?
I would say this is for the very no to slow losers, individuals that don't have a thyroid or have hypothyroid conditions or autoimmune illnesses. So it's for those hard to treat and curable illnesses, so to speak. And what we do is to take people by the hand, detox their kitchens, to get rid of certain pots and pans. We go into their pantries, into their refrigerators. You name it, we're there. To kind of get a radical cleansing, because I don't think there's time to do anything less than being extreme in this day and age. We want people to enjoy extreme health for many, many years.
Well, what kind of pots and pans would they want to get rid of?
Wow, this is most radical, Ellen, but I'll let you in on a secret. First of all, we get rid of all the aluminum. No aluminum foil. I'd rather dine with a serpent than dine with aluminum foil, because when you cook with aluminum foil, you're eating aluminum, and that's very detrimental to pepsin, hydrochloric acid, and can impact your brain. We know this about aluminum. It's very drying to the system. But in addition to that, something that I uncovered when doing the research for radical metabolism is most interesting. And one needs to get rid of the pots and pans that are made from cast iron, because that old cast iron pot or pan that was handed down to you by your grandmother may be leaching iron into your foods. And we're finding that iron overload is becoming a real hidden factor in Alzheimer's, arthritis, and heart disease, and would become toxic waste dumps of iron as we get older if we don't donate blood regularly or stop menstruating as females. So it's the iron that's the real kicker when it comes to being radical in the kitchen.
Now, I have heard those high iron levels being linked to heart disease in men, but it doesn't seem to be discussed too often about being an issue in women. What would you say?
It's just as much an issue with women, but the men start to stockpile the iron earlier because they don't menstruate the way we do. Don't forget, for at least 30 years from the time that you're, well, it's even more than that, Ellen. If you start menstruating at the age of 14 and you stop at the age of 54, let's say, that's 40 years. So you are losing iron every month, but a male is not. So we start to approximate the same level of heart disease as a male once we stop menstruating and go through menopause. So not only does the excess iron impact your heart, but it impacts the brain and your joints and your liver, and is also one of the reasons for all those brown spots we get on our hands. So it's a real factor in degenerative disease and aging. And so that's one of the more radical things we do when you learn about what to do in the Radical Metabolism Kitchen. Very, very interesting, because people are loath to give up their cast iron pots and pans.
Now, besides cast iron and aluminum, which you mentioned, what about the non-stick pans?
We don't like those either. They can contain substances which are not good for your system. Most people are aware of that. And I also don't like people cooking in copper, because that can impact vitamin C levels and zinc. So there's a whole list of what you should actually cook with, what you need to get rid of, and how to really substitute for the aluminum foil that's so prevalent in today's cooking and reheating.
That's true. I've certainly been conscious of that for years. The only time I'll use aluminum foil is I also keep wax paper. So if it's something that would be convenient to wrap in aluminum foil, I first line it with wax paper. So the aluminum never touches the food.
We don't want it to touch the food or touch your lips. Absolutely.
So there's ways around it, you know? We're still alive, and we've been doing this all these years.
That's right. And so aluminum is a killer. We know this. We want to reduce our exposure as much as possible, and then, of course, increase our ability to excrete these heavy metals. And that's where a good fiber comes into play, and that's where the Radical Metabolism 4-Day Cleanse comes into play, and all of the supplements that I mentioned in the book.
Well, that is great information, and I'd like to remind you that you are listening to Herbally Yours right here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse, and today my guest is Louise Gittleman, and we're talking about her book, Radical Metabolism. And she's talking about radical things like redoing your kitchen. That's a pretty good one. And also, what is your cleanse about?
It's 4 days where we focus on juices and a special soup, which is none other than watercress soup, made with a little bone broth, if you please. Very healing for the gut and very good to get rid of any type of substance that could be cancer-producing, because what we have learned is that watercress, which is known as a bitter green, is very high in at least 10 cancer-fighting phytonutrients. So we flush and flood the system with all of these cancer-fighting phytonutrients, polyphenols in some of the fruits and vegetables that we juice, and I even focus on a little celery juice, which is so important for its mineral salts. And you do this for 4 days. My people have lost 10 pounds in 4 days, and they have not gained it back once they go on the 21-day program. So it's a great cleanse, it's a great detox, and it's a great way to kind of kickstart weight loss for the spring bathing suit come summer season.
And it's nice, too, because you're talking about 4 days, which most people can commit to. But you can't just go back to eating all the crap, that you were eating before or afterwards. It is a commitment to yourself in terms of wellness.
It's a commitment, and then after that we get into the right kind of oils that are so important for the skin, so that when you lose the weight, your skin is not sagging, bagging, or dragging. And that's where the omega-6 hemp seed oil comes into play, because in my book we shout hemp, hemp, hooray, Ellen. I'm a big believer in the omega-6 qualities of hemp seed oil.
Well, let's talk about that, because boy, oh boy, hemp is, just skyrocketing now with the fact that the FDA has now approved the sale of full-spectrum hemp oil, which I don't think is what you're talking about, like the things that we eat, and also the CBD oil. So tell us more about your perspective on hemp oil.
Well, my perspective on hemp oil is that it's a very high source of omega-6s. It's very nurturing for the skin. Excuse me. I get so choked up when I talk about hemp seed oil.
That's cute.
So That's number one. Number two, it is a structural element for the cell membrane, and then number three, it feeds the mitochondria. So it's very deficient in the diet, and 1 to 2 tablespoons a day will start to replenish your skin in about 2 weeks. It's really extraordinary. So we got the omega-6s. It's an essential fatty acid. We're very deficient in this particular essential fatty acid. Good for the skin, good for psoriasis and eczema. I've had people that have cleared up long-standing skin problems, particularly eczema, with a little bit of hemp seed oil. So it's a really up-and-comer, a real star when it comes to being radical and healthy.
Now, what is the difference between, what they're calling now full-spectrum hemp that they're using for pain versus hemp oil, which is more of something we think of as a food?
Well, this is from the seeds, not from the stalks of the hemp plant. So this is exactly from the seeds and is the higher source of the omega-6s that are so nourishing for the skin and the cell membrane.
Okay, that's excellent. So and it's available. I've seen it in health food stores where it's hemp oil, which is actually in like the food section, and it's not in the supplement area as much. And also, it tastes really good.
It actually, it's very, you get used to it. I like it better than flaxseed oil, quite frankly, and I like the hemp hearts as well. So hemp is a very important aspect of radical metabolism. It allows people to lose weight rapidly. It helps them to feel satiated after a meal, and it's really good for the skin, hair, and nails. So it's a beautifying food inside and out.
So what would be a typical breakfast if someone were to follow the radical metabolism plan?
Well, we have what we call the citrus blaster, which is coffee, where, I'll tell you something interesting about coffee. I'm not a coffee drinker, but I read all the research for 20 years suggesting that it really cuts down on the risk of liver problems, liver disease, good for diabetics, good for anti-aging purposes, good for bones. I mean, there's nothing about coffee that is negative other than the fact that it could be grown with pesticides. So if you get an organic coffee, it will do miraculous things for your waistline, for the slashing diabetes and heart disease, as well as blood pressure. So I felt I was obligated to write a little bit about coffee and make up a breakfast that had a cup of coffee. I'm a believer in the Purity coffee, by the way. That's the one that's mold-free, organic, high in polyphenols, chlorogenic acid. You put a little whey protein in there with a little bit of spice, maybe some ginger or some cardamom, and a little coconut milk, and you've got a breakfast in the morning with your protein, fat, and carbohydrates. So it's a really good source of nutrients that'll keep you going for 4 hours. And that allows people to, again, lose weight and feel satiated and protect their liver. And I think that's very important in the season of detox. You want to support your liver, which is your major detox organ.
That's so true. Well, believe it or not, we have gotten through so much information, but we're actually almost at the end of being able to continue to speak. So I would like you to tell people, Anne Louise, just a little gem of wisdom and where people can find you and your new book, Radical Metabolism, and all your books.
They can go to radicalmetabolism.com, and you'll get all the practical tools to achieve a healthy weight. Will help you resolve health challenges, including autoimmunity, gallbladder issues, type 2 diabetes, and you'll get some radical health tips that you can actually put to use right now. So learn about the fabulous foods to kickstart your metabolism, to heal your gut. Learn about the forbidden fat you should never stop eating, and why people can't lose weight on keto and paleo-type diets. So all of this we talk about in Radical Metabolism.
Well, thank you so much, Anne Louise Gittleman, and thank you, listeners, for tuning in to Herbally Yours, produced in the studios of 90.3 WHPC, Nassau Community College, Garden City, New York. For further information, email us at whpc@ncc.edu. This is your host, Ellen Kamai at naturalnurse.com, inviting you to join us next week for another edition of Herbally Yours. Until then, stay healthy.